I just got done watching Jennifer Lawrence's brand new hard R raunchy comedy called No Hard Feelings. This is about Maddie, who thinks she's found the answer to her financial troubles when she discovers an intriguing job listing wealthy helicopter parents looking for someone to quote-unquote date their introverted 19-year-old son Percy and bring him out of his shell before he leaves for college. But awkward Percy proves to be more of a challenge than she expected, and time is running out before she loses it all. And straight out of the gate, when this trailer premiered, I went and laughed, and I felt very cringy at the same time. And I thought to myself, this movie is either going to be absolutely hilarious, one of the best comedies in quite a few years, or it's going to be one of those comedies that I cringe at, laugh at, and kind of go, okay, that was not great. What I actually got out of this was something that's kind of in the fine line in the middle of that, as well as something surprising. And I say surprising because this movie has an actual sweet spot to it and a dramatic core that I wasn't expecting. And I've been seeing some kind of hints that maybe this is a throwback to early 2000s hard R raunchy comedies. There is definitely an aspect to that, specifically in the way that the humor is laid out. But the thing that actually surprised me the most is the best way to compare this movie is it feels like an early Judd Apatow film. Imagine Knocked Up, 40-Year-Old Virgin, or maybe even Funny People, which Funny People takes a very hard, dramatic twist at one part. But that's actually how this film feels. And when you look back at some of those earlier Judd Apatow movies, it feels like a straightforward comedy for about half the film. Then the back half hits a dramatic moment where it actually starts to feel real. And there's definitely pros and cons to all of that, but what I actually think here is that Gene Stubinski, which I might have just mispronounced and I apologize, who did the film Good Boys, which I found to be an absolute laugh riot. I love that movie. But that movie didn't really have a core essence to it. It had kids getting in trouble and tons of laughter with that, with younger kids saying the F word. This film actually has a little bit more of a mature tone than I expected it to have. And that is actually why this film was the most surprising. So I'm excited to talk about No Hard Feelings in a lot of good ways and some, cringy ways as well. But I definitely want to hear your guys' thoughts down below in the comment section. Film is very subjective, specifically comedy and horror. I've always said that. So I'm curious, did the jokes land for you in this film? Did you guys love this film more than I did? Did you hate this film? Let me know down below. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button more, and let's get into this conversation. So every movie review, I love talking about the pros first. And the first thing I actually want to mention when we come to talk about this movie is Jennifer Lawrence. I will argue she nails this movie and she carries this movie for a lot of it. Not because the film is bad by any means, but she really elevates this movie from being a generic comedy that you've seen before to that next level and brings that mature tone that, honestly, you walk a very thin line with the material in here. Being a 32-year-old woman who is set up to quote-unquote date a 19-year-old. That's weird. That's not a great eye-opening thing. Jennifer Lawrence can actually bring that to life, and instantly when you meet her character, you can see the troubles that she's in. And what I really like is that this character is actually a little bit more deeper than you could imagine, and you really get to the center of what the rooted is. And I've always wondered, why did Jennifer Lawrence decide to do this film? She's not known for this. It always feels like she's a little bit picky when she does choose what she's going to work on. And it's cool to see her going outside of her bubble and doing a comedy like this because she has great comedic chops. Specifically see that in this film, but her dramatic chops come out as well, and I was very happy to see that, and I thought it actually worked for the entire runtime. Of course, this film would also not work without Andrew Barth Feldman, who I have never really seen him much before, but he is fantastic in here. Their chemistry, you actually really start to believe in, and I think the thing that I actually loved about Andrew's performance is the way that they actually started to show this character coming out of his shell. You see how much is burdened on him. You see how much all that is going on him and how much self-consciousness he has. And for me, as someone who can be an introvert at times, I really love to see how Andrew played this role. And while his chemistry with Jennifer Lawrence actually really starts to come out in flames, specifically after one of their first few date nights when they're at the house and you have Nelly's Hot in Here playing, but the sequence after that is actually the part that made me go, okay, this movie actually has a little bit more of a sweeter core to it than just this sexed up, R-rated, raunchy comedy. And from that moment on, I was like, okay, this film's going to be a little bit different. And I actually really loved where it started to go from that point on. Because honestly, we'll talk about that in a second. I do actually kind of wish this film would have taken a more dramatic approach from the very start. I understand the concept a little bit hard to go off of that, but I do think that Gene Stubinski does a really solid job directing this movie. And again, it kind of reaches into his inner Judd Apatow, and you can definitely feel that there's not enough comedies made like this. So I will say, if you do like hard R-rated, raunchy R-rated sex comedies, that's a tongue twister in itself, I do recommend that you go support this film, because we don't get enough of these. This film's good, and Joyride, which is coming out soon, I also have to praise. I'll have a review out for that soon, but that's also another great comedy. We need to support films like this in the theaters. Going back to Gene, I thought he did a really good job directing this movie, and I honestly think if it wasn't for his directing, again, this film could have tilted off. There's a fine line this film had to walk, and it walked it perfectly fine. Of course, the reason you go to see a comedy is to make you laugh. And do you laugh at this movie? Absolutely. Some jokes make you go snickering. Some jokes will make you bust out laughing, particularly probably one of the most outrageous scenes in this movie, which is played at such a perfect point, which is, all I will say, Jennifer Lawrence fighting someone. That's all you need to know. Not going to say the location of it, nor am I going to say the context of it, but it is wild. And I love that sequence, and there's a lot of sequences in here where there's just great laughs. And I was happy to see that some of the trailer moments didn't completely get thrown all in there. That's a moment that they could have easily advertised somewhat in some trailer, but they didn't, and they hit it in the film. There's some good little charming moments in here that really get those great laughs. Like I mentioned, I actually thought that most of the jokes honestly landed. A lot of them go a little bit outrageous, but for the most part, some of them just feel very realistic to how people talk. And while the entire scenario is quite outrageous for what they're trying to build up and what Maddie's actually trying to get out of all this, for me, looking at it, the way that all the characters handle it in their performances, again, some elements they do are a little bit outrageous, but everything really solidly works, and I had a smile on my face watching this entire movie. During that back half, that's where I actually really started to feel for the characters, and by particularly the way that the film ended was actually one of the sweetest parts of this entire film. But with that said, we've talked about my pros. Let's get to my main issue with this movie that does hold it back, and that is just the pacing. The film feels a tad bit too long. I sat there going for the last 30 minutes, I checked the time, I'm like, okay, we got like 30 minutes left, and I shit you not, it felt like another hour. That's not to say that the back half was bad, but I genuinely feel that the tone of this movie, and I've always felt this in a lot of Judd Apatow movies, is that get to those more dramatic moments, that shift really screeches it to a halt at times, and while you're enjoying the characters, you're kind of going, all right, I know where this is going to end up. And that's kind of how I felt in this film. It was a little bit predictable. I knew where this was kind of gonna go. I like where it went because that's kind of where I wanted the characters to end up with in the end, but yeah, it did feel pretty long towards the end. Really the one thing that kind of holds this film back, I just don't see myself rewatching this one too often, but it's one that I can definitely recommend because I think No Hard Feelings is a good, solid comedy, and honestly, I'd probably put it more in the dramedy aspect of anything. I think this is a hard R, raunchy kind of aspect that we just don't get a lot in theaters, and I heavily recommend just to go see it and support it for that much. Gene as a director does a solid job. I like seeing what he's been creating in Hollywood the last few years. Jennifer Lawrence is phenomenal in this. I really hope that this is kind of that next surgence and we get to see more of her. I know she took a little bit of a break. This was a great film to kind of see her come back to. Alongside Andrew Barth Feldman was fantastic. Matthew Broderick as his father is also great. Laura Bennett, he is great. It's always great seeing Natalie Morales. For me, though, this is just an entertaining film with good jokes that make you laugh, some that will absolutely make you gut bust, and then a lot of heart to the film as well, which was actually the most surprising aspect, and that's kind of why No Hard Feelings surprised me. It was more than what I expected it to be, and I think if it wasn't for the pacing, this film would have been honestly one of my favorite comedies I've seen in a long time. Maybe I'm just tired, maybe I need to see the film again to really feel that a little bit better, and I'm looking forward to recommending this movie to a lot of you guys, but with all that said, I'm going to give No Hard Feelings a B. Thank you so much again, guys, for watching. Make sure to hit that like, subscribe button, comment down below your guys' thoughts. What is your favorite comedy you've seen in the last 5 years? Let me know down below. And of course, until next time, stay classy.